welcome back to What's Karenna Cooking. So today I have my grandmother with me, my mom's mother, and we are going to be making sourdough bread. For anyone who lives in the community, you probably know this as granny bread, or at least that's what we call it. We have our bread starter right here. This has been pre-made, so you can borrow this from somebody in the community. Takes about a cup, or you can make it yourself about 3 to 5 days ahead. She has holes in the top so that it'll aerate. So you want to take a cup of your starter to begin today's bread process. If you need to make your own starter, I'm going to attach this recipe below on the blog post, and you can figure out how to do that.
I'm going to take a cup of the starter. First we're going to stir it up because it's been setting a while, and we're going to stir it up well because it has settled, where we've let it sit in the refrigerator and be ready again to use at your convenience and when you can plan to have time to make it into bread. So we take that, and then we're going to add another cup of warm water.
You want to add to your starter every time before you take your cup out to start your bread, correct?
Right.
So that you'll have some left over for next time and keep it going.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Got to feed it.
Yeah.
So you want to add half a cup of sugar.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Okay. We have the instant mashed potatoes.
Potatoes help it to rise. You just stir it real well. Make sure that everything is dissolved and mixed up well. Then you put the top back on the jar. And just let it set in a warm place and where there's not a cold draft or anything, and let it work. Let it all work together for 4 to 5 hours.
Okay.
And you can watch for it to rise. It'll rise from the bottom and come to the top, and then it'll go back down. You can just watch it from time to time.
So we put our starter in the warm water, and we're gonna let that sit for about 5 hours. So the fermentation process, you should definitely allow around 8 to 12 hours for that. At least that's what the recipe calls for. But if you want to speed it up a little bit, you can put it in some warm water, and like I said, that'll take around 5 hours. Stir it about every hour or so to make sure it's fermenting properly. There it goes. Oh, look. It's moving big time now. Okay, so it's been about 5.5 hours. We took a quick nap, we did a little workout, and we're ready to finish the next step of making sourdough bread. Okay, so I have a half a cup of canola oil, and she says that you can use canola oil or olive oil. And then we're gonna do a cup of our starter. We're gonna do 1.5 cups of warm water in there as well. And then you just mix that all together.
You can also mix it.
Add 1 tablespoon of salt. Say when.
That's good.
Granny, when did you start making this bread?
In 1985, I got my first starter from our pastor's wife. She's been making it for a few years, and she shared it with me, and the bread was good, so she gave me a starter. It just helps to stir a little bit as you go, so it won't be so thick.
Okay.
Hard to stir.
Uh-huh.
And you want to know what I did with all that bread I made?
What?
I gave most of it away.
To who? The community?
It's really nice to have, yes. It's really nice to kind of keep it on hand if you can. I normally make it week, sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, depending on what's going on. If I have an event coming up, or a reunion, or people coming for dinner, I'll make it up and have it on hand. And if someone in the community was sick, or in a church family, I would take a loaf of bread to them, and they loved it. And we would eat some occasionally. Most of the time, maybe one loaf. Gradually, we'd eat a loaf at a time. Just when all the children were grown.
This is getting a little tough to stir, so we're gonna turn it over to the KitchenAid mixer and put the dough hook on. If you don't have a KitchenAid mixer, I would definitely recommend getting one for anything you're cooking. That's good, Mom.
I'll tell you, Karenna, one thing I learned, that sometimes this would get kind of stiff before I got it fully mixed up. And I would always add a little more water if I needed to. But it seems like it's coming off of the hook there pretty good. I don't know that I would add any more water. That's just one thing to keep in mind. If it ever gets too stiff on you. And after you mix it up really good, so it'll form into a ball. So that's what it's doing there now.
So since the dough hook has already made it into a ball, we're gonna go ahead and put it back in our flour bowl and roll it around a little bit, hopefully. Okay. So what am I doing here, Granny?
You're gonna roll it around in there. You might have to put your hand in it. Get it. There you go. Just roll it around. And then you got a nice ball there.
Okay.
Maybe you might want to see if you've got any edges that are not covered with flour, and just make sure that it's all covered with flour so it doesn't stick to the bowl. Now you want to spray it with some spray or some of your canola oil, whichever you want to do. Just rub it over it and be sure it's covered with oil.
Whole thing?
No, just a few drops at a time. Yeah, you don't want
But the whole
you
ball?
don't want it sticky. Yeah, just a drop or two. And then just make sure it's the whole ball is covered. There you go. So you want to keep it soft. Pull off enough wax paper to cover it. So you want to let that rise, and just check it from time to time and see if it's rising. If not, you want to take it to a little bit warmer place.
Okay.
But if you're going to let it set overnight, then you don't have to worry about it. It's going to rise overnight, and it takes about 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours, depending on the temperature in your kitchen and how warm it is outside. So, for instance, in the wintertime, it's going to take it longer to rise than it will in the summertime.
Okay, how big is it going to be when it rises?
It's going to come on up. Sometimes it will cover the, just come on up over the bowl just a little bit.
Okay. So it is 8:45 right now, and we're gonna leave this here overnight and come back tomorrow and put it in their individual pans. All right, so welcome back. It's the next day, and here is our dough that we made last night. So it didn't exactly rise as planned.
After looking at this, I think it looks really good. It looks pretty. And I believe that maybe we rushed it into rising a little bit. We rushed the process. So it didn't give the starter long enough to work itself out, to rise enough to where we could go ahead with the process of mixing it with the flour. And so that's one thing we want to be careful about, is just letting it rise naturally And when you see that it's about doubled in size, you know it's ready.
So we went ahead and made another batch of dough, and I'm gonna show you where we put it so that it would rise well. And Daddy.
Hey.
Okay. So here's our next batch. It's already rising a decent amount. We've got it sitting in the sun at a good temperature.
So you might think this was a waste. Well, not necessarily. We can take this and go ahead and put it in the bowls or the dishes anyway, the loaf dish or pan, whichever you use. And we're gonna just test it and see if it will rise. And we'll go from there.
We are gonna go ahead and grease these 3 pans and then split that dough up evenly between the 3.
Okay, you just pull out what you think is about 1/3 of it and work it up in your hands into a loaf. A little bit more than that. There you go.
Supposed to
Round
weigh
it off in your hands.
And make it like a...
As smooth as you can, but it doesn't have to be perfect by any means, because it's going, as it rises, it will form to fit the dish.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Here's my first little loaf. Ooh, that one I think is gonna be a lot smaller.
And as you go along, the more you do it, the more you all get it exactly like you want it. Sometimes we're disappointed with it, but the end taste is worth it all. It may not be so pretty. I call it my ugly bread if it doesn't turn out right. If it doesn't look pretty, I call it my ugly bread. Usually we'll eat the ugly bread and give the pretty loaves away.
Okay.
But
is this too big?
Well, it's a little bit bigger than this one, but
what about
if you want a bigger loaf, or you can divide part of it with that.
Okay. We pinched a little bit of this one off and added it to our small loaf. Try and make them a little more even. Last one. Okay.
You might spray it again, just a little bit on top. Very lightly. There you go. When it comes out, it'll be nice and brown. With a little extra so when it rises, it'll come out. There you go. And just let it set.
Once you put them in the pans, how long does it usually take for them to rise?
Depending on how warm it is in the room that it's sitting in.
Okay.
I would say 6 to 8 hours,
Okay.
approximately. And if you see humps coming up in it in the top, that means it's got air bubbles. There's air bubbles in it.
Is that a good thing?
So, well, you've seen light bread from the store.
Yeah.
It has holes in it sometimes, and that means there were air bubbles in there.
Okay.
Nobody got out. I'll show you a little trick here that I learned. Nobody told me this. You just learn as you go along how to correct little things or add to or whatever. You can't hurt it. But if when you open this up and you see bubbles coming up under there, you just take a little toothpick and you go boop, 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 boop.
And pop them?
And pop them, and they'll go back down.
Okay.
But when it settles, when all those air bubbles are gone, it's going to be smooth. And you'll have to give it a little more time maybe to even over so you won't have holes in it, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Like dips.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it'll turn out pretty. But it doesn't matter if it's pretty or not, it's always good.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That is true. We're back again. So we went ahead and cooked the first batch of bread, and it didn't, like we were saying earlier, it didn't exactly rise as planned. But while it's still warm, fresh out of the oven, we're gonna put some butter on it. I must be bad luck for Granny. Usually her loaves come out perfect every single time. All right, Granny, tell me what you're doing.
I see a few air bubbles here, and I am going to pop those. If I don't, there will be holes in the bread once it bakes. So you just jab it with a toothpick very lightly.
Got our coffee going in the background this morning.
Smells good, doesn't it?
It does.
Okay.
Julie. These haven't risen quite as much as they could, so we're gonna put them in the oven while the oven preheats, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Karenna,
Uh-huh.
what do you think?
We just pulled them out of the oven, and I'm just gonna butter them up real quick before we take them out of the pans. That one's a lot easier. Which one should we cut?
I would cut the little one.
This one?
Yeah, in case you want to give one to somebody else.
So you give yourself the ugliest one?
Yeah.
Okay. There's one little piece.
I will take some.
Okay.
You take the big one. Good.
It's perfect.
Mm-mm.
We've just taken these twist tie bags and wrapped the loaves in them.
I've received a lot of joy over the years of making this granny bread, which they named. It was just called sourdough bread when I started, and it became granny bread with them, so that's what we call it. Anyway, as I shared a little bit earlier, I have enjoyed giving the bread away, and especially I think my favorite thing to do was to share it with cancer patients that had lost their appetite. Food didn't taste good to them anymore. And I had an elderly neighbor that she had eaten my bread, and she called me one day and she said, "Dottie, I would just love to have a loaf of your bread. I can't eat anything, but I think that would taste good." So I happened to have a loaf at that time, and I took it to her. And she just went on and went on about that. And other cancer patients have done the same thing. And it's been very rewarding to me. And it's good for birthday gifts, Christmas time.
I know it's my favorite birthday gift to get every year. Granny bread.
And I love that. Everybody loves it. Family loves it. Neighbors, just whoever you give it to, they appreciate it. And it would be a joy, I think, for you if you wanted to do something like that. It would be a real pleasure, and you would feel like you'd done something to help somebody along the way. I've enjoyed spending this time with Karenna, and I hope that she'll help continue this recipe on to the younger generation, and that one day she'll be teaching her granddaughter how to make it.
And if you would like to learn how to make the famous granny bread, then be sure you scroll down to the blog post and find the recipe there. Like I always say, thank you again for watching What's Karenna Cooking, and we'll see you next time.